Okay, can everyone see that? Still working.
Got it.
Great. All right, so yeah, we're together here to talk about the West Buttress route on Denali. This is somewhere that I really love to be. I really think it's a particularly spectacular place on planet Earth, so I'm really excited to share this with you. Like Mary said, I've done 9 expeditions up there, and each one is just its own journey into this kind of wild, otherworldly place. So I'm glad that you're all excited about the prospect of being up there. And in this presentation, basically the goal of this from my end is to orient you all to this mountain. We're going to talk about like the rhythm of life, of the caching system, of moving up the mountain, some specific terrain features, some weather specifics, and also to set you up for success in terms of preparation if you're someone who's already signed up for this climb. So we'll talk a little bit about gear and food, and Chantelle will talk about the training. And then thirdly, a goal of this is just to get you excited about this mountain. If this is something that you're thinking of doing and you haven't committed to a trip yet, hopefully this is some more information so that you feel like you can go into it feeling a little bit more empowered that you're making the decision to commit to the training and the preparation, because it's no small task to take on this mountain. So that's what we are up to here. Like I said, I'll talk all about the mountain. I'll also give a pretty detailed like day by day, or at least move by move breakdown of how to move up and down this mountain. And then we'll kind of circle back to some bigger picture stuff. So to kick it off, just for some sense of place, we've got Alaska up here in the furthest northwestern bit of North America. A zoomed in version over here. You can see the Gulf of Alaska down here, the Kenai Peninsula, and Anchorage here. I'm assuming you all can see my mouse. Is that true? Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. So Anchorage here. This is the closest international airport to the Alaska Range. So most likely your journey will begin by flying in here, and then traveling up to Talkeetna. It's about a 3-hour drive. And then the Alaska Range is up here with Denali pinned in red. So this mountain range actually stretches in this big arc, as you can see. There are many different components to this, to the broader range, but we're going to be here in the central core of the Alaska Range. And down here is the National Park Service map. So kind of an artistic interpretation of how the mountains fit together. You can see Denali here in the center with all these several really big glacial drainages coming off from that highest part of the range. And it is worth noting that Denali is in a national park, Denali National Park. So it's managed by the National Park System. And that has a lot of impacts on how we access the base camp, where the base camp is, and how trips are organized there. So just one more thing to highlight before we move on from this big picture view is just how close these huge, huge mountains are to the ocean. That is kind of what drives a lot of the weather there. And all these big glaciers, you all know this, but sunshine does not make glaciers. This is a really snowy place, and the weather can be really volatile in the Alaska Range. So, and just one more thing, Denali itself is about 63 degrees north. So it's just shy of the Arctic Circle. But during the climbing season, which is basically like May, June, and the beginning of July, it never gets dark there. So you actually can climb or be out and about any time of day. The only thing that changes is the temperature, or at least your perceived temperature throughout the day and night as the sun comes and goes and dips behind the mountain ranges, or behind the various mountains. All right, so Denali is one of the 7 summits, and it's most notorious for its weather, which can be very dynamic, the fact that you must carry all of your equipment with you, which can make it a very heavy trip, and the hard work and self-reliance that it takes to climb this mountain. So oftentimes people say that Denali is the hardest of the 7 summits, and usually that's attributed to not only those physical features I just talked about, proximity to the ocean, latitude, but also because there's no established camps on this mountain, meaning that all of the camps that you create and inhabit, you are doing that with the things that you carry on your back and in your sled. It's not like Aconcagua or Everest. You don't just arrive and there are dome tents with internet you can purchase or showers you can purchase. It's nothing like that. It's really is a self-reliant journey on this mountain. There are also no porters, human or animal, nothing like that. It's everything that you have with you on this expedition you need to carry. And that's actually mandated by the National Park Service. It's not just an ethics thing. It's actually a very formalized agreement with the Park Service in that regard. So, and I also just want to include this picture because pretty much all of the other pictures that you'll see in this presentation are like beautiful blue skies. And that's so that you can see how the terrain fits together and what terrain features I'm talking about. But don't be fooled. This view or lack of view is extremely common in the Alaska Range. And it would be statistically ridiculous if you did your whole trip and didn't have a day like this. It happens, but it's very rare. All right. So this climb is a good fit for you if, like I said, you are ready to go on a wild, big, committing adventure that might be the hardest thing you've ever done. And you need to come into this climb with some pretty well-developed skill sets. So first of all, solid cramponing. There are many potentially very icy slopes on this mountain that you'll have to navigate with a heavy backpack and with some amount of exposure below you. So having experience cramponing and developing those solid footwork skills before you come into this climb is really important, as well as camp craft. So like I said, we're building every camp that we inhabit on this mountain. And it's really important that you can build a camp that will keep you safe and warm and dry in any kind of storm that you may encounter. So that's something that that skill in particular you can develop on any of our mountaineering courses, which I'll get into in a bit. But yeah, that's a really important thing that we don't have the capacity to teach. We only have the capacity to review on this climb. Okay. Also, excellent self-care. That's one of the key players to success in this mountain is the ability to keep yourself warm, dry, focused on nutrition, focused on hydration, and in tune with your body as you go to higher and higher altitudes. So that's a must-have skill set on this mountain, as well as your ability to be a team player. It's a team sport up there. Our maximum group size is 12. So that typically looks like 9 climbers and 3 guides. So 3 rope teams of 4. And it really is like your success on this mountain really does hinge on your ability to participate with the rest of the team. And likewise, the rest of the team's ability to support you emotionally and physically as you're moving up and down the mountain. What happens to one person, it ultimately happens to everyone. So you have to work together. And going into this climb with that mentality is really important. Okay. As I mentioned before in that last kind of whiteout picture, multi-day storms in the Alaska Range are really common. And having the ability to just sit still is incredibly important. It's kind of a rare combination of things that this mountain demands, which is someone who feels the fire and can be motivated enough to train for this and work hard every single day, but also have the ability to sit still when need be. And that's the true sign of a seasoned mountaineer, that they can do both. Okay. From a physical standpoint, you must be able to carry about 85 pounds between your pack and your sled, sometimes even more. And that includes group gear, group food, your personal kit, your personal food, all those things. Okay. And you also must come into this climb with the technical skills necessary to ascend and descend fixed lines, to clip running protection, and to be a competent part of a rope team. So walking on a rope and glacier travel configuration, as well as what to do if you or your teammate falls into a crevasse or takes a sliding fall. So in order to develop those skills, what we like to see, and the vetting process for this at Alpine Ascents is quite rigorous, because that is how we've found success on this mountain, by rigorously vetting the climbers who are joining our teams. So we ask that you have done a Denali prep course. Those are 8-day courses specifically tailored to developing all the skills I spoke about above. They take place on Mount Rainier, 8 days from basically first week of January through end of April. And that course is specifically designed to give you everything you need, set you up for success. So I highly recommend that course. And if you're like a little bit on the fence about it, it's a lot easier to invest the 8 days in that course than it is to invest another month or so climbing Denali again if you went into it unprepared. So it's really worth taking the time to set yourself up well before you fly into the Alaska range. Okay. Other prerequisites that we recommend or require are mountaineering courses that we offer. That comes in the format of 6 days, 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, or 13 days. All of those have different components and emphasize different things, but we'll give you the baseline skill set you need. Most of those are in the Cascades, some are in the Alaska range. And then we also ask that you've done 1 or 2 other climbs with at least one of those in glaciated terrain that use crampons and ice axe. So again, those prerequisites are basically a way for us to gauge that you have those skill sets I mentioned above before you fly onto this mountain. With all of our mountaineering courses, you'll receive a detailed evaluation from your lead guide, and they will basically recommend Denali or recommend that you do other things before you go to Denali. So that's a good litmus test as well for seeing if you have what we are looking for you to join this climb. Alpine Ascents offers this climb at a 3-to-1 ratio. There are other companies that offer this climb at a 2-to-1 ratio, but here at Alpine Ascents, we've been really successful with the 3-to-1 ratio because of this, because we have within our programming the ability to like watch and support climbers as they develop into someone who's ready to go to Denali. And we also have a really heavy vetting process to make sure that if someone is coming on their own and joining a team, which is very common, that they're with people who are also ready to be there. We don't want anyone to feel like they're joining a team and disappointing their teammates. So we try to make sure everyone is on the same page with the skills that they're coming in with. And we have a really good track record of operating on this mountain and in this park with that mentality. So finally, I just want to mention experience at altitude is helpful. The acclimatization on this mountain, just because our loads are so heavy and we have to move to a cash and carry system, which I'll explain in a moment, the progression and elevation is quite slow in this mountain compared to other places like our programs in Ecuador or in Peru or Mexico, but that just has to do with the nature of this climbing. So if you can come into this climb with some experience at altitude beforehand, you'll just be much more prepared to take on the challenges of Denali. Okay, so here's a route overview. We've got this, so this is basically looking at Denali. There's a wilderness boundary that's right about here, obviously invisible in this picture, but right around here, which is kind of why the base camp is where it is. So in the wilderness, we cannot use machinery, right, to access the mountain, but we can just outside of it here in the base camp. So we access the base camp with fixed wing planes flown by extremely talented pilots out of Talkeetna. And we can land here by deploying little skis on the plane and land right on the glacier. And that is where the journey begins. So we'll access the base camp in that way. The first move is down Heartbreak Hill, onto the Kahiltna Glacier, and then here to Camp 1, also commonly known as Ski Hill Camp, because just behind it here is Ski Hill. Oftentimes, this is where you'll begin a cache and carry system, which I'll explain in detail in a moment. So that puts you at this camp for a couple days. If you do not move to a cache system and just carry on, you may make a camp somewhere in this area. But however that is navigated, you'll come up here towards Kahiltna Pass, turn the corner, and get to the next camp at 11,200 feet. So 11 camp is what that's commonly known as. Usually, the method of transportation from base camp to 11 camp is snowshoes and 2 poles. You don't really encounter any steep slopes, and the flotation that you get from the snowshoes is really valuable as you're crossing bigger crevasses in the lower Kahiltna there. So above 11,000 feet, it's very common to move to crampons and 1 pole, 1 axe. As you come up, the slopes get steeper and more exposed. You'll come through Motorcycle Hill, Squirrel Hill, and around Windy Corner here into 14 camp, 14,000 feet. 14 camp is kind of in this big amphitheater, as you can see. It's basically the launch pad. It's where everyone waits for the weather window to appear and makes the preparations that they need to go into the upper mountain beyond that. So usually this is where the sleds end. So we'll use sleds until about there, and then continue just on foot with our packs above that. Above that, you encounter the fixed lines and the 16 ridge, the ridge at about 16,000 feet on the West Buttress proper, which is a stunning life edge ridge, beautiful views on either side. A mixture of snow and granite is what you're walking on, and that will lead you to high camp, 17,200 feet. So from high camp, that is your final camp. You basically go from there to the summit and back. And on summit day, you come around here to Denali Pass and then actually out of view until you wrap onto the summit ridge. They're just below the summit at 20,300 feet. In terms of, and I'll go through each of these moves in more detail in a bit, but just to see how it all fits together, because it is such a massive mountain, it's nice to have this kind of big picture view. And it's worth noting from a weather standpoint that these different levels of the mountain, you'll encounter very different weather. So if there's any kind of storm, low pressure system going on, typically this zone, 11,000-ish feet or lower, that manifests in a way that's dominated by precipitation. So usually it's a lot snowier down here than it is higher up. A very uncommon strategy at 11 camp is to build wind walls, because that actually just traps the snow and keeps it set. Shoveling out your tents is a lot harder to do, versus up here higher in the mountain about 17,000 feet, kind of the opposite. When storms come, usually at 17,000 feet, those storms are dominated by wind. And so building wind walls is almost imperative at that camp. And then 14,000 feet, it's kind of splits the difference. You can get wind, you can get snow, and sometimes you just sneak through the difference. You can hear the wind up high and you see the snow down low, and you're just in this nice in between spot. So another reason why it's a good place to wait for a good weather window. And finally, I just want to note that in the mountains with wind, right? Wind moves as a fluid. The wind will move in the lowest points. There's a name for that phenomenon called the Venturi effect, which basically means when wind encounters a low point, it will speed up. So you might hear like a wind funnel. So there are three notable places for this on this route. One is Gehiltner Pass. The next is Windy Corner. And the third is Denali Pass here that you'll encounter on summit day. So those are just three notable landscape features where the wind there is a lot stronger than elsewhere. So that's kind of a bigger overarching view of this place, of this route. All right, and let's get into how we travel there. So caching is basically a system where you move half of your things up the mountain. You dig a very deep hole in the snow, as demonstrated by Sam down here, and you leave that stuff in the snow. You mark with the GPS, 6-foot wand, and you come back for it later. It seems kind of wild, but it's because as you move up this mountain, the slopes get steeper and steeper, more exposed, and it just becomes impractical and unsafe to carry all of your things at once. So we cache. We move to a cache and carry system. Your team may begin this system at camp 1, or it may begin the system at camp 2, but at some point you will be basically unable to carry all of your stuff at once. So this becomes a more practical system. This also is convenient because it sets you up to acclimatize much better than if you were just moving in a one-way direction up the mountain. So the rhythm is typically you get to a camp, the next day you cache, move half your things above, and sleep at that same camp. The next day, perhaps you move, perhaps you rest, depends. And then when it is time to move to the next camp, you can move there. You could pick up your cache on the way, or you could do what's called a back carry. So you go back down the next day for kind of an active rest day, collect your things, and bring it to the higher camp. Those are all common strategies, okay? Yeah, there's actually quite a lot of art to deciding what to cache and what not to cache. And that's something that your guide will give you really specific directions on, but it's worth keeping in the back of your mind for the food packing portion of your preparation, that you will likely be splitting your things in half as time goes on. Okay, some other specifics on life up there are pooping. Basically, on expeditions, this crosses all international cultural boundaries. It always comes down to talking about poop on expeditions. You'll find this to be true on Denali. But here on Denali, we use this thing. It's called the Clean Mountain Can. This is an initiative by the National Park Service, implemented several years ago to keep the mountain a lot more clean. And it really is. It's a very pristine environment up there. So we do our part to make sure that we are active participants in that by using this can for all of our human waste, all of our solid human waste. We'll pee in designated places in the in each camp, but all of our poop will go into these cans and then we'll carry them down the mountain. So Alpine Ascents has part of our agreement with the National Park Service is that we'll actually remove all of our poop from the mountain. So usually what that looks like is we'll use a bucket like this one. Let's do this with a Clean Mountain can inside, a bag inside the Clean Mountain can, and then an actual toilet seat on top of the bucket. So it's a lot more comfortable than just pooping straight into the can. Usually the bucket stays at 14 camp. It's just kind of tricky to move all the way to 17. So we'll leave any luxury items like buckets behind at 14. But between base camp and 14, it's pretty luxurious to have something more substantial to sit on than just the Clean Mountain can. All right, also sleds, that's another big part of life there. You can see this person has their sled really neatly packed. Sleds are really common to 14 camp, and there's a wide variety of strategies of ending up there with maybe one less sled than the amount of people you have, so no one has to have a sled on the way downhill in the back of a rope team, but that's going to be really team specific. Point is there's a lot of strategy to this, but below 14 camp, having a sled is very common. And the sleds are usually carrying duffel bags and other items. We will provide these things at our compound in Talkeetna, and there's some cord here we'll use to lash everything down, and then we'll connect the rope to the sled as well as your duffel bag, and then connect the sled to your backpack. And the specifics of rigging your sleds, that's something that you'll learn in the Denali prep course as well. We'll make sure you're all dialed in so that when we get to base camp, it's a pretty smooth transition to get on the road. All right, so let's talk about the itinerary step by step. And I just want to emphasize that these first couple days, day 0, day 1, those are like specific days of the trip. And beyond that, basically anything could happen. So I'm just giving you an outline of all the specific moves and the specific components that you need to achieve as you go up the mountain, but there's no timeline associated with that. Storms can come in that can kind of shut down your team for days on end, or you can move through the whole mountain pretty quickly. It's really just up to the weather as well as the internal conditions of the team. So, but these first couple of days, day 0 and day 1, you are less at the whims of the weather. And this basically is the foundation for the climb. So day 0, you'll fly to Anchorage or get to Anchorage somehow, and then drive to Talkeetna. And that day is yours. Here on the left, we've got, this is some classic Talkeetna nightlife here. This is the Fairview. And if you're not acquainted with that bar, you will be by the end of this trip. Over here, we've got a picture of Dave Hahn taking a picture. Beautiful downtown Talkeetna, and then some mountain. These are the Denali, Hunter and Fork that you can see from town. So actually, when you get a clear day there, the views are stunning. But you'll make your way to Talkeetna, get a good rest, and then the next day we'll start the journey. So we'll start with a gear check at the Alpine Ascents headquarters, just outside Talkeetna. We'll come pick you up, we'll bring you and all of your gear out. We'll go through every piece of equipment, make sure you're set up for success. We'll also spend some time packing the rest of our food. We'll get into food later down the line, but we'll set you up with all the food that you need beyond what's on the gear list. And then move into town to do our briefing with the National Park Service. This is part of our agreement with the National Park Service, is that we'll attend a briefing with a ranger before every expedition launches into the field. And then we'll finish up that day with dinner in Talkeetna all together, get a good night of sleep, and then the following morning, if the weather allows, we'll fly into base camp. So this is a new iteration of our itinerary. We've just reworked this for this year. And I think that having 2 nights in Talkeetna will set us up to move into the mountains in a really like calm, centered standpoint. So I think this is a change for the better. Okay, and then flying into base camp. So that, like I said, base camp is accessed by fixed wing plane that needs visual reference to be able to land on the glacier. So there's no guarantee of when this will happen. It's really common to get stuck in Talkeetna for some amount of time, or stuck in base camp on the way out. So whenever the weather is appropriate, we'll fly into base camp. Once there, we've got several skills to review. Basically, skills that will set us up to travel on the glacier safely. Everything from moving on a rope team to self-arrest or team arrest. And then we'll talk about sled rigging, potentially camp craft. And the rhythm at this point could look like a variety of things depending on the temperatures. You may get to base camp, set up your camp, spend the day doing skills, and then leave the next morning. You may leave in the middle of the night, or you may leave as soon as you get to base camp once you've reviewed the skills to make travel appropriate for you. There's one strategy I just want to point out here, which is usually called the night schedule, which is something that teams will often move to later in the season, because while you have light at any hour of the day or night, because we're so far north, the temperatures do change quite a bit throughout the day, and so it can be advantageous later in the season with really warm temperatures to travel on the lower glacier at the times when the snow bridges are most have the most structural integrity. So that looks like leaving base camp maybe 2 in the morning, maybe 3 in the morning, depending on the temps. That way you get the coldest temps, and that's something that your guide will decide, but it will impact this day pretty heavily, whether you just start traveling or you spend some amount of time there. So base camp's a really exciting, fun place to be. You'll probably meet climbers from all over the world. You've got this great view of Hunter. You can watch it avalanche if you want. And yeah, it's a great place. Let's see, I don't know why I'm not able to move slides. Okay. All right. From there, so your first move from there is to Ski Hill Camp, Camp 1. You go down about 450 feet. So it's just this feature called Heartbreak Hill. And then you'll go up about 1,000 feet. So not too much in terms of that day. And it's about 5.25 miles. And I've kind of outlined each travel day with the number of breaks. So in a perfect world, we could move for an hour, take a break for 10 to 15 minutes, move for another hour. That allows enough time for self-care, maintenance, layer adjustments, this and that. But the mountain is not shaped perfectly for that. So low down the glacier or low down the mountain, it's a little bit easier to get breaks when you want them, and higher up, you're kind of bound by terrain features. So I've more or less lined out not a travel time, but amount of legs per day on each of these slides as we go through it. Okay. So once you do get to Ski Hill Camp, you will stay there if weather allows, likely one night if you're single carrying, meaning you'll bring all everything up to the next camp, likely around 9,600 feet or so, and then again, single carry to 11 camp. Or you might begin the cash and carry system, which means that you'd spend a couple nights at Ski Hill Camp, and then if weather allows, move up to 11 camp. So you would arrive there, spend a night, the next day, cash, usually to about 10:05 or so, and then come back down, sleep at Ski Hill Camp, and then the following day go to 11 camp. Again, that's if the weather is perfect, if the weather allows. All right, so that move to 11 camp, it's about 3,400 feet, about 4.5 miles. You go up Ski Hill, you go over here towards Kiln Pass. This is Kiln Pass here, one of those major wind funnel areas I was talking about. And then the trail wraps around and comes up here to 11 camp. And yeah, it's about 4 breaks, more or less. A typical rhythm in this place is that you spend one night because you move there. The next day you go down and retrieve all of your things. That's called a back carry, kind of an active rest day. So it's a second night. A third night, so you go up and cache above Windy Corner, setting yourself up to move further up the mountain in the future. It's 3 nights. And then if weather allows, move the next day. Or if something within the team, some internal condition exists that the team would benefit from rest, you take a rest day. Maybe the weather doesn't allow and you take many rest days. I think not this year, but the year before I was at 11 camp for 7 days. So basically anything can happen, but that's a common rhythm is move to 11, back carry, cache, move to 14. Okay. So on the way to 14, you begin to encounter some steeper slopes. And this is the point, like I said before, where we usually leave the snowshoes behind, move to crampons and 1 pole, 1 ice axe. And then we'll also kind of shift the weight between sled and backpack. So on the lower glacier, it can make sense to have a heavier sled and a lighter backpack. And then as you go up the mountain, it makes sense to have a lighter sled and a heavier backpack, just because as you can see in this picture, this is going through Windy Corner. It's this big long traverse. The sleds want to go out to the side, right? They're going to stick to the fall line if it's icy. And that can make moving pretty difficult it can throw off your balance, and that's a pretty exposed place on the mountain, so you really don't want to lose your footing there. So changing the weight ratio between pack and sleds, pretty important as you move up. And this move is I'd say it's one of the cruxes of the route. It's just a big, big day. Breaking down camp takes a few hours. The travel to 14 camp typically takes about 5 breaks, 5 stretches. And then once you do get there, you're at a new elevation, 14,000 feet. Can feel hard to breathe at when you haven't been up that high in a while. And it takes a few hours of work to create your camp. So this is a good picture of a camp down here. Like I said, wind walls are common in this place. You know, this place is a little lower than the strong winds at 17, but higher up than the deep precip of 11. This is Foraker out there looking really beautiful. And there you are at 14 camp. 14 camp is, you know, people stay there for a long period of time, typically 5 days at a minimum. And so this is a place where it becomes kind of like a little town. There are people from all over the world here. It can be really nice. There's this place you can go and enjoy some views. We call it the edge of the world. So when the weather's nice, you can look down into the Valley of Death and see, this is Mount Hunter over here as well. So your tasks at 14 are basically to get there. That's one night. Back carry, it's a common tactic. So go down to about 13.5, collect your cache, come back up to 14. The next day, cache above the fixed lines. So that's good to get some acclimatization as well as get a dry run on the fixed lines. We'll talk about that in a second. Take a full rest day, let your body change, and then when it's time to go, you can go up to 17. So that's a common rhythm there. Most people try not to leave 14 camp until a weather window of 2 to 3 days appears up higher. Some seasons that just doesn't happen, and you have to move up with a less than ideal forecast if you're going to move up at all. But more often than not, it's worth the wait until that window appears. So you could be at 14 camp for quite a while. Okay, the fixed lines. So here's great. So in this photo over here, you don't only see one of our guides playing the shovel air guitar. You see these little teeny dots up here. Those are actually people about to get onto the fixed line. So I know it's hard to see, but I want to include this picture just as a point of reference of how far that really is away from 14 camp. So the fixed lines travel up here, this snow gully before you get onto the ridge, and walk along the 16 ridge over to 17 camp. So in this photo here, we're at the base of the fixed lines looking up. The base of the fixed lines actually has this big bergschrund, this big crack that stretches across the mountain, and you connect to the fixed lines there, move up. Usually on your back carry day or rest day, someday before you go up the fixed lines, your team will review these skills. So how to connect to the fixed lines, we'll set your ascenders up. That way you're all rigged to go. We'll talk about clipping running protection, which is a skill you'll need for the ridge above, and prepare our cache loads and everything. So this is something that you will be able to review just before you do it, but you should come into this climb with some previous knowledge of this. And again, you can get that in the Denali prep course or in some of the other mountaineering courses that we offer. But here's a good view. Actually me just standing there kind of like, yeah. But I've got my ascender here and I'm attached to the fixed lines via that, as well as a cow's tail. And I've got my rope going down to my other climbers down there. And I've got my ice axe on a leash. So I'm just all rigged up, okay? Again, you'll learn the specifics of that as you prepare for this climb. But yeah, that's the fixed lines. Okay, which brings us to our move to 17 camp, camp 4, 17,200 feet. On that day, you will encounter the fixed lines, as I just talked about, as well as the 16 ridge running protection. So you'll stay in a glacier travel configuration and clip the rope between you and the climber behind you into various pieces of running protection as you go. And you'll encounter one other section of fixed lines. This is here at Washburn's Thumb. There's a short section of fixed lines there as well, in one of the steeper parts of the ridge. When you do get to 17 camp, which is here in this little plateau, you'll be able to see the north summit out this way. This is Denali Pass, and the Audubon actually stretches right over here. It's hard to see in this picture, but That's actually quite far away. That's the first thing that you will encounter on summit day. All right, 17 camp. So again, 17,200 feet. With any luck, you will hopefully only be there 2 or 3 nights. So what that looks like, you move to 17, potentially you rest. If the weather does not allow for that, and if the team is feeling strong, you may opt to summit the following day, and then you descend. So hopefully it's just 2 nights or 3 if you rest, and you descend the mountain from there. So this is, I think, a cool picture. This is at the edge of 17 camp looking down. This little collection of specks down here is actually 14 camp. Over here is the edge of the world. And you can actually look all the way down the Kahiltna from here. Base camp is tucked in here next to Mount Hunter, and Ski Hill camp is over here just behind that ridge. So kind of cool overview of the route from above. All right, that brings us to summit day. So summit day, what we're shooting for here is a 12-hour summit day. Any more than that gets to be hazardous just from exhaustion and fatigue of dealing with environmental factors for that long. Any really faster than that, you might be moving at a pace too fast where people are going to burn out all their energy. So 12 hours is what we're shooting for. It's 3,100 feet up, 3,100 feet down, and about a little more than 5 miles round trip. And this is no small task. I mean, this day is really intense. It takes a lot of strength. I will say that unlike some other big mountains like Aconcagua, for example, where every day leading up to summit day is not as hard as summit day. Summit day, sure, is harder than the other days leading up to it, but at this point, your body is likely ready for it. So Denali does prepare you for the rest of Denali, which I think is a beautiful thing about this mountain. In this photo, you can see this is the Audubon. This is a particularly busy day. It does not always look like that, just so you know. In fact, I would say it usually does not look like that. But it can when the weather is really bad and teams get stacked up for days and days waiting for the weather window. So it's really important that for the good of you and your team that you are very skilled at clipping and unclipping pieces of running protection by the time you enter this, because that way everyone can continue flowing smoothly through this piece of terrain. Because the Audubon, this feature, has usually about 30 pieces of running protection that each person has to clip and unclip. So moving through this smoothly is very important. Summit day, you know, you might borrow the experience of your time like in the Cascades and elsewhere and think that, oh, we're gonna have to wake up at like midnight or something and start climbing. But actually the Audubon is slightly west facing, and it's really not very prudent to begin launching on the Audubon until the sun hits it or just before. So actually summit day, usually leave at like 11 in the morning or something like that. And again, because this feature is west facing, it keeps the light and you can come down 11 or midnight and still be in the light as you return back down to camp. So kind of an unusual summit day. If you remember when I mentioned this at the beginning of the itinerary, if you are on a later season climb and you move into like a night schedule type of program, meaning you're traveling in the coldest part of the night, usually that timing will flip as you go higher and higher on the mountain. So eventually you actually want to climb in the heat of the day just so that you're minimizing your exposure to the environmental hazard that is cold. On summit day is a perfect example. Whether or not you start in the night program, you usually will finish with a later start on summit day and a later return. This is it's actually the pin that you will find at the very tip top of the mountain. And this is a team celebrating. All right, and then the descent. So like I said, summit day is very hard. Most people, by the time it's all said and done, say that the descent is the hardest part of this entire climb. That is because unlike on the way up where you're caching and carrying your pieces of equipment and food, so you're actually only traveling with half your gear for the most part. On the descent, we carry all of our things downhill at once, and we pick up our cached gear along the way, cached poop, trash, things we don't need anymore. So we're stopping at various camps, recollecting caches that we've left there, and arriving at the airstrip anywhere from 1 to 2 days from when we leave 17 camp. It can be advantageous to rest at 14 camp or even rest at 11 camp on the way down. especially if the weather won't allow you to fly out or if the weather is making travel hazardous or something like that. It's also really common to do this all in one go because you're racing the weather or because, um, yeah, for really whatever reason, you just need to get down. This is, like I said, a 1 to 2 day endeavor, but it could take even more than that if the weather just keeps you pinned in one place. This photo is a really beautiful sunrise at, I mean, who knows, like 4 in the morning or something. The sunrise is at kind of odd hours and sets at odd hours. You see alpenglow at all sorts of funky times of day up there just as the sun arcs. But these haggard people sitting on their sleds, I think, have been awake all night and are very happy to arrive at the airstrip. And sometimes, actually, oftentimes people will tell me that though that was the hardest day, that was their most enjoyable part of this climb, or the views coming down the Kahiltna late in the day when they're kind of in this weird headspace. They've maybe been awake for a long time. They maybe summited the day before, but it adds to the otherworldliness, this journey down the mountain. Okay, then you get to the airstrip, you wait for flyable weather, and when it's time, you fly out of the mountains. And this is one of the most bizarre experiences that I've had, and a lot of people say the exact same thing. You've been in this environment where you only see snow and ice and rocks, and the only colors you see are the fabrics that people are wearing or the tents. And then you are looking out the window and you see this little bit of green, and it starts to just become stronger and stronger as you go down. You see liquid water that you haven't seen in weeks, and it's just a really hard to describe experience. It's like culture shock, but it's culture shock from like planet Earth. So very worthwhile portion of the trip. And then all of a sudden you're back in the world of cell phones and roads and stores, and you're back in Talkeetna. So that's the day to day on the mountain. Let's circle back and talk about some food and some gear, and then we'll move into the training portion of this. So from a food standpoint, your guides will cook breakfast and dinner every day, and then lunch you're on your own. That kind of strikes the difference between having food that's like warm and filling and you don't have to pack it or prepare it, but then you also have some autonomy with your lunch food. So these are just things I crave: burgers, cookies. And this is one of our guides in an apron. This is the inside of one of our cook tents. We'll have a tent that everyone can sit down in as the guides cook meals, prepare hot water, things like that. And we actually can do some baking up there. This is a nice cake. We'll have burger night, steak night, burritos, macaroni. Actually, our menu is very good, I will say, especially seeing other folks' experience up there. I'm always really proud to be with Alpine Ascents and eating as well as we do there, because there are so few things that give us pleasure in this place. So having really good food is one of those things that can really change the mood of the group when you've had like a cold, long day and then you get to hold like a warm burger in your hand. It's pretty amazing. In terms of packing your own food, you'll see on the gear list for Alpine Ascents, we recommend 42 bars. Bars could be whatever, shot blocks, something like that, goos. A lot of that should be for your summit, like have the summit in mind for that. Stuff that's really easy to digest. That way, when it's just hard to take care of yourself, windy, cold, whatever, you can just shove a snack in your mouth and be okay with it. And then you'll supplement that with food that you will source in Talkeetna at our headquarters. So on our gear check day, we have a wide variety of like bagels and cured meats and cheese and salty snacks and sweet snacks. And you can supplement your food that you've brought with any of those things that you choose, as well as hot drinks, teas, hot cocoa, coffee, all that stuff. But if you really want the top secret pro move of how to pack your food for this trip, I'd recommend going out in the town, drinking as much tequila as you please. And the next day when you feel terrible, just like go to the grocery store, look around, look at what looks good to you, and that will set you up for success for what you can eat at altitude. People have all sorts of things that they cannot tolerate at altitude for whatever reason that they can other places. So think about what you might be able to eat when you feel absolutely terrible. And that is what you should bring on this trip, because altitude can do some weird things for you. So yeah, so do take your time in considering your food for this. And gear is also a big thing that you need to prepare before flying in the mountains. I'm not going to run through the gear list because all that information is like very clear and precise on the Alpine Ascents website. But I do just want to emphasize, please arrive in Talkeetna with every single piece of gear on the gear list. There's not a gear store in Talkeetna. Very hard to correct missteps. And it is extremely cold up there. Most of the people who have had accidents on this mountain, it's actually due to environmental hazards. So don't skimp on gear at all. And if you have any questions about the gear, you can always contact our gear staff via email or phone. You also can just reach out to your guide individually. All those things are totally fine. And I mean, I field all sorts of questions, and I really appreciate when people are reaching out to me, because it shows me that they are actually going to show up prepared because they're already thinking about it at this point. So, don't hesitate at all to do that. But what I do want to touch on is luxury items. So these are two very different pictures of cross legs here. Over here, we got some hot pink toenail polish. I think that your mental health is so important in this big snowy place where you might have a lot of time just stuck in a tent, that if you can find some little luxury item that will help keep you entertained, your trip will be much better. So sometimes I bring hot pink nail polish. I usually bring incense. I think that that is worth a lot more than its weight up there. I'll just burn it in the vestibule, get the boot smell out of the tent, especially because I'm usually sharing the tent with male co-guides who have very smelly feet. So that's a nice thing to have. I know some people bring like pillowcases just to have a little touch of home up there, or an actual book, because that's more enjoyable to read than a Kindle, something like that. But search your soul for what might bring you joy up there, and don't feel hesitant to bring some little thing that will actually make you a bit happier up there. Okay, and that is all I have to share. We can move into training, if that works on your end, Chantelle.
Yeah, that was awesome, Hannah. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
let me see if I am able to share my screen. Uh,
I will
here we go.
stop share.
All right, let's see. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, awesome, great. So Hannah did a fantastic job of sharing what the journey looks like, and you can see that it is not a walk in the park. It's really challenging. And so you're gonna spend a lot of money doing your preparation course. You're gonna spend a lot of money for this expedition. You're gonna spend a lot of money on your gear. And so another thing that you should not be skimping on is your preparation and your training. And so, it does take a concerted effort to put some time and energy and thought into your training. And if you're not sure how to do that, Uphill Athlete is here to help. So we are a coaching company, and I think Mary gave a great description of us at the beginning. That Uphill Athlete literally wrote the book on training for high altitude athletes. So we have a couple of ways that we can help. And one of those ways would be one-to-one coaching. So that's where you would work with your very own coach. Your training would be personalized to you, your goals, your strengths and weaknesses, your location. So we have people that are preparing, let's say, who don't live in the mountains. We have an athlete actually who lives in Jamaica. Imagine this guy training on the beach with a tire, dragging a tire around, and sometimes dragging a sled around on the beach in Jamaica preparing. So if you live in an environment where you're really not sure how to prepare for big mountains, or you have a little bit less experience, or you're a little bit nervous about this big adventure, you have a really busy schedule, you need a lot of accountability, then working one-on-one with a coach would be a great option for you, because it is the most customized and it is the one where you will get the most individualized care and attention. And Uphill Athlete does offer a 5% discount on our coaching to all Alpine Ascents clients, which is really great. We value our awesome partnership. There's another piece that we can also add on to training, individualized training with a coach, and that is hypoxic conditioning coaching. So if there is anyone who is planning to use a hypoxic generator, so like sleeping in whether you're sleeping in a tent, altitude tent, those types of things. We have two coaches on our team who are altitude specialists, and we develop specialized protocol for you that works with your training. This is only available to people who are already working with one of our coaches one-on-one. And I'm one of those coaches who's working on these protocols. And then we have another coach, Martin, who does those as well. So we do have that level of support for people who need really specific individualized help. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have our training plans. And we have maybe some of you who are watching today who have done one of our plans before. We have a 24-week comprehensive expedition plan that is a really awesome fit for people preparing for Denali. It is 99 bucks to buy the plan. You have it forever. You can use it again. And it's not just specific to Denali. You could use it for other expedition type climbs as well if you wanted to use it again in the future. So you can buy it once and you can use it forever. And it's really a great way to prepare if you already have a good amount of experience, you have a pretty regular and regular schedule, you're pretty self-motivated and you don't need extra accountability. And the plans are really great because they give you, a lot of extra information in terms of how to make the most out of the plan. Gives you instructions if you, let's say, live in the flatlands and you're preparing for a big mountain, how you can adapt your training in that way. We also have some ascender workouts that are included in here, which is important for Denali. So lots of great things to help you prepare. So for those who are pretty self-motivated, and this is a good sort of do-it-yourself approach. And then we have a third option, which is kind of a hybrid model, and this is our training groups. So this is a great way, option if you are looking to have some coach-supported guidance, but you don't necessarily need to be working with a coach one-on-one who is checking in on you every day. So in this way, you would be able to train as a group. So you would be able to meet other people kind of virtually who are preparing for different types of adventures all around the world. If we get enough Alpine Ascents folks who are interested in doing some group training, we could also create a special Alpine Ascents group within this as well. But you would have access to our training plans, our strength training plans, great follow the trainer strength training videos, which are super helpful. We have weekly expert lectures. And then what's really cool is that we have a community support forum as well. And that's really cool because you'll see that we have, so let's say we would have potentially in this list an Alpine Ascents group, and that would be specific and exclusive to Alpine Ascents climbers. So you'd all be in there. Maybe Hannah would be in there as well to answer questions, or maybe Mary popping in now and again, asking some questions that are very specific to your climbs. But you also have the opportunity to opt into some other groups. So for example, we have a female uphill athlete group. We have a mountaineering specific group. If you did any other kinds of sports, you could join those groups as well. So that's a great way to meet other people who maybe have similar lifestyles and similar goals, because sometimes training can be a really lonely endeavor. You may be training for Denali and you know that there are several other people training for Denali, but you don't know any of them. Maybe you're in Austin, Texas, and you don't know a single person doing something like this. And you have a lot of people in your life wondering what the heck you're doing and why you're wanting to do this. So it can be really lonely. And this is a really great way to make some connections. There's a really cool map system in here where you can maybe find other people in your area to train with, or maybe you're traveling from, I don't know, maybe you're traveling from Florida and you're going to go to Colorado for a week. Maybe you have an opportunity to meet some fellow Denali climbers there. So that's really quite cool to be able to meet up with people there. And then you'll see in here, we also have different options where you can, we have a lot of different things here. So you can learn about nutrition if that were interesting to you. You can also participate in weekly lectures. And so you don't have to be there live. You can catch the recording as well. But you can see that we have regular guests who are presenting on a variety of different and interesting topics. And then we also have a weekly kind of coach open hours where you can show up and ask your specific questions. So maybe you have specific questions about how and when to incorporate doing your sled training. What can you use? Is it best to use tires? Is it best to use a sled? Is there a time to use both of those? So lots of really great ways where you can also not only just follow some training, but also learn about your training, learn about yourself as a high mountain athlete as well. So I think this is a really valuable part of this. And again, it's a good way to link up with other people who have similar values, similar ideas, and who are training for similar things. And I don't know how many times I hear people say, you know, I didn't want to do my workout today, but when I opened up the app and I saw that 24 people had already done their workout today, I got my butt off the couch and I did the work. So I think that's a really cool benefit there, is that you get that accountability. Also within the training groups, we will have a coach who's going to be looking at your training, and you know your training is going to again look something like this. Every month there's going to be a coach who's going to be looking at what you actually did, giving you some feedback, and then also you have an opportunity to ask maybe if there's a question that you have about your training or something you're not sure about. You can also ask it in the monthly review. So I think that's pretty cool. And also want to mention that our Alpine Ascents climbers also have access to a special discount, which is 10% for the training plans. And so that's what I wanted to share about that. Mary or Hannah, anything extra that you think I may have missed on this side of things?
I don't think so. That was awesome. I'm really excited about this Alpine Ascents community training group, because I think it's such a great way to like build community and accountability and just have people you can train with in the 6 months or more prior to your Denali climb. So cool.
Yeah, like Hannah said, you're a team, right? And that team aspect is really important. And when you are training for something like this, you are accountable for yourself, you're accountable to your guides, you're accountable to your fellow climbers. So doing the best job that you can prepare will help you be a better teammate. And if you have the opportunity to meet your teammates before you even get to the mountain, to establish your team together, to be kind of solidified, I think that's also a really strong aspect as well. Because when you're on the mountain, we are moving as a group, we are moving as a team, and we can only move as quickly as the slowest person, and no one wants to be that person. So this is a great way to work together to help each other, even way before we get on the mountain, to be as prepared as we can be.
Wonderful. Chantelle, thank you so much for that part of the presentation. Super helpful. Are we ready as a group to transition into our lively Q&A? Yes, we're going to do it. Okay, let's see. We'll do an easy one right off the bat. I saw several different questions, all related to poop. So with the CMC cans, the Clean Mountain cans, first question, is it a solo can, so like one can per one butt or person? Who carries the can in between camps? And are we using wag bags above 14? Those are our questions about poop.
Great questions. No, it is not one can per one butt. It is one can per team until the can is full. And then you cache it at that camp. So for example, we're at camp 1, right? And we're there for a couple nights because we're doing the cache and carry system. And then it's time for us to move to 11 camp. Well, we'll take all of the Clean Mountain cans that we've used, we'll tie up the bags, secure them tightly, and leave them in a cache at camp 1. That way, in a couple weeks, when we come back down the mountain, we'll dig up that cache, take the poop with us, and move downhill. So the idea here is that you're only moving poop downhill. No one is moving poop uphill. That is the hope. And it's actually not that gross of a thing when you are digging up the poop cans and moving them downhill, because they've been in the snow for like long enough that these things are just frozen solid. Like they don't even smell. You're just like, great, here's this material that I'm carrying down. It doesn't, yeah, it's not a mentally taxing thing carrying these things on your sled. So that's as far as who carries them between camps. Well, everyone will carry empty ones from one camp up to the next, but then the full ones, same deal, everyone will carry them down. They'll be frozen. And okay, wag bags. So we do ask that you all bring wag bags. We have them in Talkeetna. You pick them up when we do our food pack and our gear check and everything. But that is more for if the mood strikes you between camps. So if we're traveling and you have a big heavy backpack and you're like, I must poop right now. We don't want to sacrifice an entire CMC can and bag to that one event. So you'll just poop into the wag bag. And then at the next camp, you'll cache that wag bag. That way on the way down, you can grab it. It'll be frozen. It won't be too gross. And you bring it down the mountain with you. Above 14 camp, so we will still use the CMCs above 14 camp. We just won't bring the bucket and the toilet seat above 14 camp because we'll just leave a lot of, not just those items, but a lot of luxury items at 14 camp. It's just that it takes so much agility to travel between 14 and 17 that we want to lessen our load. So we'll just be pooping straight into the can at 17. Yeah. Is that all? Okay, great.
Good answers. This next series of questions is about training for Denali with what climbs would you recommend leading up to Denali? Let's say someone has done Rainier, Baker. What would be some good, like technical, maybe higher climbs to attempt before Denali? That's one part of the question. And the Denali prep course you recommend. Would you recommend doing the Denali prep course, which are offered in the winter here in Washington, in the same season as Denali? So like, let's do a prep course in January, you go to Denali in May, or would you recommend spacing those out by a year?
Great questions. As far as the Denali prep course, I think it's up to you and your comfort. Like if you feel comfortable enrolling in the course and preparing super hard before you do the Denali prep, and just going into the Denali prep feeling like I am completely committed to going to Denali this year, then good for you. I've seen that strategy work often for a lot of people. They do their Denali prep in January or whatever. They go to Denali in May or June, and they do some climbing in between and all as well. Some people just personality-wise need a little bit more information before committing to something. And so in that case, if that's you, doing the Denali prep course and then enrolling in Denali the following year will, I think, just make you feel more comfortable and confident going up there because you'll have a better idea of what exactly you need to feel like you really got it up there, But no matter what time you take between the Denali prep course and going to Denali, I think that there's a very direct relationship between how often you are climbing before going to Denali and how great you feel up there. Like you want being in the mountains to feel like you're home. This is a place that you're comfortable. I know that's hard to achieve for people who are living like in, flatter landlocked places in maybe the middle of the country. But if you can find a way to get into the mountains, like sometime within the year before going to Denali, you will likely feel more comfortable in that environment when you do go, because it is so committing to flying to the last range. So if you can get there and feel comfortable, because that's a more familiar environment, you'll just have the upper edge. So yeah. Oh, and other climbs. That was the question. Okay. So other climbs, yes, Rainier is great. Baker is great. I think that's a great training ground for fundamentals. Getting into higher altitude peaks is really great just to develop some experience at altitude. The Mexico volcanoes trip is just wonderful. The last webinar I did for Alpine Ascents was all about that trip, but I do think that that's an amazing way to gain experience at altitude and just see how your body does, start to demystify those processes for your body. Other high altitude volcanoes as well. So like Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, all those things. From a technical skills standpoint, technical like rock climbing or alpine climbing doesn't necessarily transfer over very directly to Denali. So if that's not something that interests you on your own, don't feel like you need to do those things to prepare for Denali. However, I think just time in the mountains will help you feel comfortable in the mountains. So if that's what your heart desires, go with it. But I think focusing more on high altitude peaks in a way that you can slowly gain experience and be able to anticipate what your body's going to need once you're up there and how to care for it.
Wonderful. Great answer. Now I have some questions about training, physical preparation for Denali. What tips do you have, Chantelle, for people who live in the flatlands for training for this expedition?
I think Hannah covered that a little bit. Even if you are, there are definitely things you can do in the flatlands. So real fun things like wearing a weighted pack and doing stair climb repeats, incline on a treadmill, step mills, box steps. So a lot of strength training and things like that to help prepare yourself certainly is helpful. However, nothing replaces the time and experience of being in the mountains. So if you are able to build your prep course into your preparation schedule, that's really important. If you've maybe already got the skills, make sure that you are getting out to the mountains to, again, have a refresher of how it does feel different to move in the mountains than it does climbing up the stairs, right? It's totally different. Not to mention altitude and its impact on the body. So just because you have been to altitude many times before and never had any issues, it doesn't mean that you're never going to have any issues. I worked with someone a few years ago who had spent plenty of time in the mountains and then went to do an event in Leadville and ended up having to be helicoptered off the mountain because he got extremely sick. So you never quite know. So it's always good to have a good refresher on how it feels to move, how your body is impacted, and also how to support your body. I think one of the key things that a lot of people tend to neglect is that when you are training for something like this, you're doing a lot of hard work. And so you have to do, on the other side, you have to do the things that take care of your body and support that training as well. So good sleep, proper food, nutrition, proper hydration, training yourself to eat and drink on the move. So making sure that you are fueling your workouts, but also fueling your life around those workouts, and your health, taking care of your health. I recommend that people, regardless of where you live, before maybe 6 to 8 weeks before your trip, go to your doctor, get a full blood panel done, make sure that everything is in a good place, particularly vitamin D for making sure that your immune system is in a good spot. You're going to put your body through a heck of a lot of stress. Make sure that that's in line. Make sure that your iron stores and your ferritin are in a good place, because if your iron is not in a good place, your body is going to struggle to adapt to the altitude. Women in particular, our bodies are a little bit more sensitive to these types of changes and training. So make sure that you're doing everything that you can to support your body. And I say, have the blood work done 6 to 8 weeks before you travel so that you have an opportunity to course correct if anything is off. Because it's really sad when someone has done all the hard work and all the training, and then they end up getting sick in base camp and not being able to climb. And that's pretty devastating. So don't neglect those things. And those things are things that I think are important for everyone, regardless of where you live.
Wonderful. That's a great answer. My next series of questions are related to the wonderful world of gear. First up, boots. Hannah, when people are deciding between a double boot or a triple boot situation, what are your thoughts on advising them?
There's a lot there. People have a lot of different preferences. So unfortunately, the answer is it depends, like Chantelle said earlier. But let me give you
That
some
annoying answer.
I know, but it is actually true. People do actually have preferences. But I would say if you don't already have a strong preference, if you have an earlier season trip, I'd go with the triple boot. If you have a later season trip, I'd go with the double boot. There are a few things in there though. So some people like the triple boot because they don't have to mess with the overboot. They can size their crampons once. They know they're going to work. That is great. I've also seen a large camp of folks who are like, I don't think I'll ever use a triple boot again. So I want a double boot. That way I can use this boot over and over because boots are really expensive. And just financially, I'm already so invested in this climb that like, I can't continue putting more resources to that. So those are kind of two schools of thoughts. Personally, for me, I have always used a double boot. That is a variety of things. One, they're just more versatile. Two, I prefer a bit of a later season trip. I usually like a June 1st-ish date. I mean, I've gone in a wide variety of times, but that's the time that that I prefer to go, though the whole climbing season. It's a short enough window. It's like you really can't go wrong, but that's what I prefer. So I typically go with the double boot and the over boot. Some benefits to that are you can cache your over boots. So you aren't carrying around a heavy boot the whole time. Your double boots that you're wearing are a bit lighter, and you can cache your over boots as high as 14 camp. I usually start wearing them above 14 camp. Some people don't start wearing them till above 17 camp. That's fine. There's a lot going on there. But yeah, I think people have succeeded with both strategies. I think that if you're in doubt at all, just get the triple boot. I think if you have those strong other things like, I don't know if I'll ever wear it, or I want the versatility of a double boot, then open that question to yourself. Or if you have a really late season trip. But if you're like completely in doubt and not sure what to do and have an early season trip, go with the triple boot. Yeah.
For that. Next, a question about pack size you'd recommend. On our gear list, you recommend between a 75 and a 100 liter pack. When people are deciding between like that lower number and higher number for pack size, what would you advise?
Go with the higher number for sure. It will make your life a lot easier when you're packing. With a smaller pack, like there are so many things that you're putting in your backpack that are non-negotiable. You don't want to overload your sled just because you don't have room in your pack. That will just set you up for failure further on down the line. With a smaller pack, you have to be really strategic and really specific with packing it, especially like at the beginning or end of the trip when you have almost all of your things with you. So you'll just do yourself a favor if you have a bigger backpack. I use the ABG 105, the Mountain Hardwear pack, and that pack, I think they used Denali specifically and a lot of guides who work on Denali in designing that pack. And I think hands down, that's the best one I've seen. It's a lot lighter than the Gregory Denali backpack, and it just has like all the right pockets in the right places. So if you need a specific pack recommendation, that's what I'd say. But I think in general, just a bigger pack is going to be a lot easier on you.
Oh, nice. That's great advice. I will pop that pack in the chat, so do not worry. While Hannah answers this next question, for climbers who squat to pee, how mission critical is it that they perfect the pee funnel before going on this trip?
It's critical. But do not despair. It's something that you can learn how to do, just like all these other things we're talking about. But yeah, the pee funnel, man, that's the most critical piece of climbing equipment that I own for sure. Some people don't like the pee funnel. They just go with the pee bottle with the wide mouth. I like a smaller mouth with the pee funnel. It's up to you. But if you do want to use the pee funnel, here's a good pathway towards becoming proficient. So I think starting in the shower is great. Completely low consequence. You can just practice peeing with the pee funnel in the shower, see what it's like. Next, you could try the pee funnel in the toilet, like just standing there using the pee funnel. Or you could go outside and use it. And eventually your goal here is to feel confident, like kneeling, using the pee funnel and not getting any pee on a sleeping bag or anything like that, right? Obviously you don't want to misfire on this thing, but yeah, start in the most low consequence place you can think of and move towards higher consequence. And that will really make your life so much easier. It's like pretty tragic when women need to go outside in the snow because they have not learned how to use this tool. So it's a great tool. And yeah, men as well, just embrace the pee bottle. It's a good move there. It'll make your life so much better.
All right. I think, whoa, it's already 12:16, so we'll do just a couple more questions. If we do not get to your question, do not despair. You can either email us at climb@alpineascents.com, call us on the phone. We're in the office 9 to 5 most days for the weekend, so this is not your last chance for your question answered. So just putting it out there. Training for the altitude of Denali. How has hypoxic training been shown to have good outcomes in Denali for people?
It can. Unfortunately, there's, if you look at the scientific literature, it's a little bit mixed on whether it helps people or not. Um, but the issue is we have a lot of these types of studies on people. They have been pretty short. They've been, monitoring people for a short period of time to see how it impacts them and then how it helps. Um, we had a really unique experience last year where we worked with a group of Everest flash climbers, and we had 23 people who were using hypoxic conditioning to prepare, and all but two were able to summit. The two that were not able to summit, one ended up getting sick in the base camp, and another had some issues with like horrible blisters. So not things related to the altitude, but everyone else did really well. Um, some of the things that we are learning about, in the last couple of years about hypoxic conditioning training, one area that it particularly helps with is actually the reduced stress when on the body when people get to base camp. So it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to land there and feel like superhuman compared to people who haven't used hypoxic conditioning, I'm sorry to say. However, you're probably going to feel a lot better. And so because there are certain things that hypoxic conditioning can help the body do. There are certain things that it cannot replicate. However, it's going to give a good number of people a little bit of a leg up. That's going to be a little bit stressful on the body and a little bit less impact on acclimatization once they get to the mountain. Something to think about though is that it's still quite stressful on the body to do this type of training. So you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in terms of what other stresses you're going through. So it's not easy to sleep in a tent. Maybe you don't sleep alone, and maybe that means that your partner is not sleeping with you, or it's causing some tension because they're having to sleep in that environment as well. It can be hot, it can be dry, it can be a number of things that's going to impact your sleep. And so that's going to impact how you feel, your mood, your recovery, your energy to do your workouts. So you have to plan all these things pretty carefully. And so for some people, it may be worth doing hypoxic conditioning, and for some people, maybe it's not. And again, that annoying answer that I'm sure Hannah and I give people all the time, it really depends on you too, Mary. It depends on your specific circumstance. And so if anyone is interested in learning more about this, or if you might be a good candidate, or if it's something you should consider, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that and look at your specific situation and see, what kind of guidance I might be able to give there.
Oh, wonderful. Always it depends.
Always it depends.
Yeah.
We're humans, we're complicated.
I know. For our final official question for today, this is sort of like a good big picture question. Someone wrote, I assume a 20-day Denali expedition means a definite summit, unlike other climbs such as Rainier or Baker, where we may not summit due to weather or another condition. Is that correct? Are there times that, despite our weather days, we are not able to make a summit?
Yes, unfortunately, even though that's a wide window of time from superficially look at that and you're like 20 days, there's got to be a summit day within that. But in reality, you actually only have a narrow window that you can access the summit, right? Because your bodies have to be ready to go that high. Your team has to be ready to go that high, meaning you have your cash in above the fixed lines. You are you spend enough time at 14 camp, you've done all these things, everyone's ready. There's actually just a narrow window of summit day potentials. I mean, you could stay at 14 for whatever, a week, 8 days, 10 days, those things all happen. But eventually, if a weather window doesn't appear, or you move up high hoping that one will, and it doesn't, that's just the luck of the draw, So that is actually, I'm not gonna say common, but it certainly does happen. Last year, for example, that was one of the lowest summit years on record for the mountain. And there were several teams that just went to 17 camp, and that was as far as they got. There were several teams that went to 14 camp, and that was as high as they got. my team in particular last year, we went to 17 camp with a really promising looking forecast. I had looked at the summit day potential for about a week as soon as it began to appear in the extended forecast. And sure enough, it was perfect weather below 19,000 feet, but above 19,000 feet, it was not. And what can you do? That day was followed by a pretty significant low pressure system. And that system pretty much chased us down the mountain, and no one summited for the next week or so after that. So it can certainly happen. And again, multi-day storms are really common in the Alaska range. So it's not like you have a 20-day window to summit. You still, have a limited summit window by the time you're all ready for it. But it is more broad than Rainier though. So there's that. And you do have the flexibility of waiting for the weather window to appear. But yeah, it's not foolproof at all. Denali just is its own beast.
The mountain decides.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're just the mountain interpreters, but the mountain's really the one doing all the stuff.
Oh, nice. Okay, I lied. I have one final question. This question is from me to you, Hannah McGowan. What is your favorite part of guiding Denali?
Oh my gosh. My favorite part is honestly the privilege that I feel in being able to interact with people in this like extended, unplugged, hyper present way. I think it's so unique to be somewhere where like we don't have electricity, we don't have cell reception, we don't have the internet. Maybe we have solar panels, maybe we have like satellite communication devices, but it's just categorically different than the way we usually live our lives here. And I think it's really beautiful to take a group of maybe 12 strangers, put them together doing this big thing together, and have just the undivided attention of every person be on the mountain and on themselves and on the team. And that's just a really, really unique way to spend several weeks.
Beautiful. I'm signing up for your trip, so let me leave the office.
Let's go, Mary.
Yes, we'll go together. Thank you everyone for spending a part of your Thursday afternoon with us all. Hannah, thank you so much for that presentation. It was so informative. I loved all the photos. This was the first Denali webinar where I actually saw pictures of the sixth line, so that was super cool. Chantelle, thanks so much for enlightening us about all of the great training opportunities offered by Uphill Athletes. Super helpful. I'm so excited about the Alpine Ascents training community. It will be so cool to bring people together to start training.
Awesome.
Big goal. If you didn't get your question answered, like I said, please email us at climb@alpineascents.com for any sort of like logistics questions, training questions. Well, not training, physical training questions, but that as well. Any sort of those questions. For any gear questions, we have a whole gear and logistics department at gear@alpineascents.com. They can help you decide between the double boots, triple boots. They're so helpful. Chantelle, what's the best way for people to reach you to get their training questions answered by Uphill Athletes?
I have a weirdly spelled names. So the simplest email address would be coach@uphillathlete.com. You can mention that you attended the webinar and send your question in there, and I'll be sure to get it. And if anyone has questions about how Uphill Athlete can help you in your certain situation and you're not sure what would be the best, I'm more than happy to set up a quick little consultation call and get you on the right track, whether that's with one of our coaches or in a group or something else. Our coaches are mountain athletes too, and some of them are also guides on Denali. So we would be more than happy to help with anything that we can to make your preparation as successful as possible so that you have a better chance of being in the right place at the right time on the mountain.
Wonderful. And for everyone who joined and didn't take notes, don't worry. This has been recorded and we've posted on the blog probably like in a week. So don't despair. Well, thank you again. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye. Thank you, Chantelle. So good.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Mary.